Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Daily Fantasy Flex podcast, the NFL edition. I am your host, Bryan. I am joined, as always, by fellow FantasyLabs guys, Matthew Freedman and Peter Jennings, a.k.a. CSU Ram 88. This week, also joined by another Labs guy, Adam Levitan. We are here for Week 17, obviously a pretty crazy week because there are different little levels of motivation for each team. Some teams already locked into their playoff spot. Some teams need to win to get in. Some teams need to win to get a specific seeding. So instead of our usual real or fake segment, we're going to jump into talking about these games and the motivation for each team, and then we'll get to some of the chalk talk. But first, let me kick to my co-hosts. Pete, how was your Christmas, man?
Christmas was much better than Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve, I got slacked, but luckily Christmas, people are a bunch of degenerates, including myself, and they fired massively on the slate, and I had 100% ROI, and I actually had more action on a two-game slate than I did on the main slate. So the Eagles' last touchdown was nice. So I'm riding a one slate winning streak, which is about as long as any winning streak I've had in the last 2 months. So I guess I'm doing all right.
Yeah, I hear you. Levitan, how was your Christmas? And did you play all these DGen slates as well?
Yeah. I got lucky. I had Foles and Ajayi on the two-game slate, which was like, I never expected him to throw one to Ajayi, which was so wild. So yeah, I did well on the two-game slate also. But more importantly, last time I was on this show, Freedman invites me as like a last-second like fill-in throwaway. He couldn't get anybody else. I show up. There's nobody there. There's no guest. There's three people. I got me and the legend Ian there with Freedman. I'm glad here that I'm on a full slate show at least and hang out with you boys. So yeah, forget Freedman, but it's great to see Peter and it's great to see Bryan.
This isn't just a full slate show. This is like the fullest of the full slate
all
shows.
16
all one slate.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I deserve to be thrown under the bus, not Freedman, by the way, Levitan. So thanks for filling in last time. And I
was gone that week too, but I do appreciate I appreciate the Freedman shade. So let's keep on rolling.
Whatever, it's fine. I was holding down the fort. That's what happens. The guy who holds down the fort is always the one who gets blamed.
Is that a saying? I haven't heard that.
Yeah, it's a saying. A wise man said it just now on the show.
Where Freedman is from in Edinburgh, Scotland. That's what they say.
That's what they say.
Pre-show, I was also showing off my snitch that I got for Christmas. So we got some Harry Potter love here. I have some wings that I have yet to install. Freedman, do you have any Harry Potter memorabilia that you got for Christmas?
No, pretty much just sat there watching Game of Thrones all day. It was glorious. The best day of the last 6 months of my life. It was wonderful.
Nice. So none of my family has seen Stranger Things, so we've been binging that during the holidays. Have you guys seen that? Fans, not fans?
I haven't seen it. It's on the docket of something I'm going to be forced to watch later.
Yeah,
it's on the docket for me too.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. All right. Well, I hope you listeners had a great Christmas. Really interesting slate, as Freedman mentioned, 16 games. So quite a bit of information to get to. So yeah, we're going to start just going by game here. We'll run through as quickly as we can, but we're just going to talk motivation, what we expect as far as playing time and stuff like that. We'll start with the Texans and the Colts, first game that I have here. Of note, Houston out of the playoffs, but they don't have a first-round pick, which is interesting. So they don't have anything to play for, but they also don't have anything to tank for. And then the Colts have nothing to play for. Freeman, you wrote in this article earlier today, we're recording this Tuesday night, about motivation for all teams. What are your thoughts on this game as far as playing time? These teams don't have anything to play for, but Houston especially doesn't even have a reason to sit their guys either.
Yeah, I mean, I think, a home game, this is probably going to be Chuck Pagano's last game coaching for the Colts. He's, a somewhat popular guy. I think, the team will basically be playing the same way that they've always played. Both of these teams have basically been dead forever. I don't see any reason why they would be doing anything different at this point. I think, potentially there could be some extra motivation for the Colts, but I think it's basically business as usual. One thing that is interesting is that just the splits with Watson and without Watson for the Texans, and then also with Watt and Merciless and without Watt and Merciless, they are just so stark that the Texans are just dead the moment that they get off the bus. So it is a really intriguing spot. We especially saw Brissett and T.Y. Hilton go off on the Texans last time they played, and now they're playing at home in that dome. So a nice spot for them.
Yeah. Pete Levitan, any thoughts on sort of how you're dealing with motivation this week? Obviously, if we get word on some teams, and we'll get to some of those momentarily, we have some news on some teams. And we even got earlier, last week, the Eagles were going to rest some of their guys once they locked up their spot. But if we don't get word, like, how are you guys playing? Like, if a team is not in the playoffs, but we don't have any word on what to expect as far as resting guys, like Pete, what are you going to do with that team?
I mean, it's tough. I think the best thing you can do is figure out guys that you feel really confident in their roles. Fortunately, we do have some teams that have incentive to play. And then other teams where, we'll get to see some of these guys for sure. Like, there's definitely some spots where they'll roll out their young guys more. And then, yeah, like what Freedman just mentioned with the Colts, like I expect T.Y. Hilton to still play a normal amount. They want to get Steve Brissett. So curious Adam's take, but, you definitely put a premium on guys you're going to get a lot of snaps and opportunity.
Yeah, I think teams that are dead and have been dead for like a month, like why would they wake up in week 17 and be like, okay, today is the day we bench T.Y. Hilton? You know what I mean? Like that would be absurd. So there's a difference between a team like Dallas who just got eliminated from the playoffs. Guys are banged up. They want to rest guys. They already said they're going to rest guys versus a team like Indy who is dead, has been dead. So, I think when evaluating the out-of-playoff teams, it's pretty clear-cut for me. Unless we hear differently, I presume that all these dead teams that have been dead are going to keep playing their guys.
And Levitan, you're pretty in the know as far as following beat writers and stuff. Like, are we going to get a lot of information before Sunday on most of these teams?
Yeah, let's be careful with what coaches say. Like Doug Marrone comes out and says we're going to play Sunday to win the game. Our starters are going to play. So let's not get ahead of ourselves and say Leonard Fournette's definitely playing the whole game. I think we also have to use our judgment a little bit, and we'll get to Jacksonville, I'm sure. But, it would be crazy for the Jags to play Leonard Fournette, who's dealt with quad and ankle issues. So it just doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, coaches will be asked about it all week, and they'll all give answers to varying degrees of truthfulness. I think it's up to us to decipher that a little bit. But for sure, the safest plays are going to be guys on teams with starters declared out, possibly Kansas City, possibly the Rams, and then guys on highly motivated teams such as, Patriots, Panthers, Falcons, Chargers, there's a bunch of teams that are highly motivated. So yeah, I think a good mix of that will be the optimal lineup construction.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's keep on moving through these games here, and we'll run through as quick as we can. I'll just kick it to you guys. If anyone has thoughts, if you don't, then we'll keep on moving. Next game is Browns at the Steelers. Browns obviously don't have anything to play for other than maybe they don't want to go 0-16, be the second ever team to do that. The Steelers do have something to play for, already locked into the playoffs, but they could get the number 1 seed. Freedman, are you like buying into the Browns don't want to go 0-16 or – I mean, we do have a spread on this game that's 14.5, so this might just be a slaughterhouse.
Yeah, I mean, it's a situation where the Steelers are as motivated as you can be, and from a negative perspective, the Browns theoretically should be as motivated as you can be, but that's basically been the case for them all year, and they haven't been able to pull out the win. I don't know why it should be any different now. Like, they're going to go 0-16, and I think they're going to get crushed, and it's going to be glorious.
Nix is going to score 3 touchdowns. You heard it here first.
I know. When you tweeted that, I knew you were tilting so hard.
No, I was so
What is it with these fullbacks? These fullbacks getting touchdowns.
I had a piece of a really high-stakes season-long league where we lost by 7 points in the championship, and we had Le'Veon Bell and Alshon Jeffrey.
I want to say this on the Steelers. I know everybody's going to say all week that they're all out, that they're totally safe. What if – like, they can't finish any worse than the second seed. What if the Patriots are up 28-0 or 31-0 at halftime at home against the Jets? I've seen speculation from at least one Steelers beat writer today that it's possible the Steelers could pull their starters at some point. And with Le'Veon Bell up at 10K on DraftKings, like I can't have 3/4 of Le'Veon Bell for 10K. I mean, maybe I can against the Browns, but like I definitely can't have 2/4 of Le'Veon Bell for 10K. So that would be a slight concern for me because I do expect the Patriots to just come out and put the hammer down on the Jets.
Here's the one thing I will say on that. Like, the Patriots have been in situations like this before. Like, it happened a couple of years ago where if they beat Miami, they would have the number 1 seed, and they did not beat Miami, and then they had to play on the road in Denver that year in the AFC Championship game because of that. Like, they've had opportunities where they could beat teams they clearly should have beaten, and they didn't in Week 17. So even though we theoretically should see the Patriots come out strong, like, it took them, into the fourth quarter to be able to pound the Bills when they should have been pounding them all game. Like, it would not be surprising if for some reason, although, like, who wants to bet on Bryce Petty, but, like, for some reason that they can't finish it as easily as they should.
Sure.
But I am with Levitan on that, which is why I would say the Steelers are probably more of a GPP play than a cash game play.
Mm-hmm. And, they just experienced this injury to their, their stud receiver, Antonio Brown. So maybe in their minds that makes them a little more cautious than they normally would be. Going on to that Patriots game, they are at home against the Jets. They are absolutely massive favorites. They're at 16.5 currently at home. They obviously can get the number 1 seed, and the Jets have nothing to play for. We sort of mentioned them. Any other thoughts on that game?
Not really.
I mean, Dion Lewis, assuming that James White and Rex Burkhead both sit out again, I would expect Dion Lewis to be one of the most owned players on the slate, just on first glance.
Yeah. Let's keep on moving here. It's Packers at Lions. Neither team has anything to play for. So what are we doing, Pete? What are you doing with this game?
I mean, I would lean on Levitan here on Tuesday night to see if anything's come out about Detroit, but I don't see – I mean, they've been beat up throughout the whole year. Offensive line, Stafford's had hand injuries. I just don't see why they'd roll everyone out, but maybe I'm wrong. I think they kind of fall into that Dallas category. On Green Bay's side, I mean, Hundley's going to continue to play as much as he can. They got a bunch of young receivers. We saw – what was that guy's name? Who was it? Cole? It's not Cole. I was meant to look into this. The 6'6" guy.
Oh, Michael Clark. Yeah.
Yeah, Clark. Yeah, he looked like someone who's intriguing. It's like a GPP play to me. So I mean, I don't hate like the Green Bay guys as much. We'll see though. I mean, on the Detroit side, Levitan, do you have any preference on what to do with this?
Yeah, I mean, Lions coach comes out today and says he's given no consideration to resting his starters. I mean. Whatever, like on a 16-game slate, like it's going to, your options, your player pool is going to fill up so quickly that like I don't think you're going to end up on Lions guys and Brett Hundley guys at all.
Guys you could end up on, and so there are 2 games here that neither team, 2 games in the slate where neither team has anything to play for and neither team is in the playoffs. Like there are a couple games where the teams don't really have any to play for because one team has already locked up their spot. But two games where the teams are not in the playoffs and they cannot do anything, so that there's absolutely nothing they can do. First was Packers at Lions. The other one is Redskins at Giants, both out of the playoffs and neither have anything to play for. Left-hand, what about that one? Because that's a little bit better of a spot. Redskins, Giants, we have been targeting guys against the Giants all year.
Huge game for the Giants, who must lose this game to ensure that they have a top 2 pick. Obviously, Rosen and Darnold are likely to be the 1-2 picks, assuming that they come out, and the Giants do not want to miss a chance at one of those 2. So huge game for the Giants to lose. The best way for them to lose is to play Eli Manning. So I expect Eli Manning to start the game, and we'll see if he plays the whole game, but they need to ensure they lose this game. So I would be very skeptical on any Giants.
So what does that do for the Redskins?
For the Redskins, yeah, I mean, I didn't really look at the Redskins too hard yet. They've obviously been dead for a little bit now. I don't know. To me, they forced Samaje Perine to play through a groin strain last week instead of taking a look at Capri Bibbs. That doesn't bode that well. So, my first instinct is that it's probably not a game I'd be too interested in.
So, Pete, do you want some Capri Bibbs against third-string Giants guys?
course, I would want some Capri Bibs. I mean, that was the most tilting thing about the whole morning, and it screwed up my teams. So that was a disaster. I'm sure I had some props on Capri Bibbs who ended up playing, so even more of a disaster. Yeah, I mean, Kirk Cousins is still auditioning to get paid. So, I mean, that's one factor that I think you have to look into a little bit. You know, the Giants are just a train wreck.
Can we believe they're actually going to tank? Like, they're actually going to take this game?
It's just falling apart. I mean, like, they have their own players calling other players a cancer. I mean, everyone's going off on Eli Apple and saying how much of a just terrible person he is and all this stuff. So the Giants just seem devastated. Their talent on the offensive end outside of Ingram and Shepard is very weak. They have Eli Manning at quarterback. I mean, I don't mind Redskin plays, but it's not a game that stands out as like a spot that I want to target a lot.
Yeah, I like that. I think in both of those games that you've highlighted, Brian, we can see, Gruden is possibly coaching in his last game with the Redskins. He has something he's kind of auditioning for. Same with Cousins. And then with Caldwell with Detroit, it's potentially his last game with the Lions. There been some rumblings that this could be the end for him. So both of those guys, I think, have a little bit of extra incentive. I think it sounds weird to say like they have extra incentive because it's possible that it's their last game when they should be incentivized the whole season to keep their job. But, I don't know if that narrative has any merit or not, but it's something that could be there. But I don't know if it should actually impact the way that we make any DFS decisions.
Fair enough. We have one game on the slate where both teams are motivated to play. Only one out of 16 games where both teams need to win. That is the Panthers at the Falcons. Panthers need to win for seeding, and the Falcons need to win to get in to the playoffs. Levitan, I'll kick to you first. We know these teams are both highly motivated. Is this a game that you would want to target more than the others?
I think so. I mean, there's also some really good matchups here. We know the only way to beat the Panthers defense is at perimeter wide receiver, and that's where Julio Jones is. We also know that the best way to attack the Falcons defense is through pass catching running backs, and that's where Christian McCaffrey is. So I think those will be two really strong plays on highly motivated teams.
Yeah, Pete, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, Christian McCaffrey burned me big time this last week. I was very heavy on him. I think this is a great spot for a bounce back and to continue the season of trolling. So I am going to be on Christian McCaffrey. I think people will be really high on Julio Jones as well, especially if some value opens up, which there already is some value. But if we get, strong confirmations on some of these younger players getting opportunities or big opportunities, I think spending up on Julio makes a lot of sense. So that game, to me, really, really stands out as a spot that I want a lot of exposure to. The other team that I'm really excited to roster a lot of guys on is the Chargers. Mm-hmm. So I think that there'll be a lot of ownership around kind of the Falcons, Panthers, and Chargers, as well as the Patriots this week.
Yeah, Freeman, any thoughts on that Panthers-Falcons game? It seems like, especially in cash games, if you just want the safety of guys playing and guys motivated, like Pete said, having some exposure to that game more so than others seems like a smart way to go.
Yeah, I think Levitan nailed it with those two plays. They're guys who are going to get volume anyway. And then on this slate especially, there are some of the few guys that you can reasonably project for some locked-in volume and good matchup spots. The one thing I would say is just the Falcons, they've underperformed Vegas expectations offensively more than any other team this year. So I don't like, just from a team perspective, going with players on teams like that. But Julio Jones is such a beast that, when he has a good matchup, and especially when there aren't many other options that you can reasonably project to have volume, it's, the guy you kind of have to go with.
Cool. So we have a bunch of teams that are at home that are playing teams that have nothing to play for. So we'll talk about those in just one moment. But the last game, before we get to those, that there's really nothing that either team has to play for. A little bit different than the other ones we talked about, like Redskins, Giants, because the Chiefs are already in the playoffs, but they cannot move their seeding. They are on the road in Denver. So this is an interesting scenario in which the Chiefs, nothing to play for, Broncos, nothing to play for, but the Chiefs do have motivation to rest. Levitan, have we gotten any news on what we might expect from the Kansas City guys?
No, but I'd be absolutely shocked if any Chiefs starters played. We saw them go down this path in 2014, almost the exact same scenario, and they sat out everybody. They turned it over to like Chase Daniel and like Dexter McCluster. This year, it'll likely be Patrick Mahomes and Akeem Hunt and Demarcus Robinson, which they're all super cheap on DK, which would be exciting. I think the Denver defense is certainly a shell of its former self, but going into Denver is still not ideal. Patrick Mahomes, though, at 4,700, if you played preseason, if you watched preseason, you couldn't help but be excited about what you saw from Patrick Mahomes. So, going into Denver, I don't even know if people are going to show up. Pete probably knows better than me. You can probably discount the home field advantage somewhat in this meaningless Week 17 game, but Mahomes would be strong from a projection standpoint and still, I think, somewhat scary for me.
Yeah, I like Mahomes a long term. I mean, he's a guy who elite athlete, could have played Major League Baseball as well. There's a reason the Chiefs traded up for him, just elite arm talent, and was an incredible athlete and fantasy scorer in college. The problem is going into Denver, I mean, yeah, the Broncos defense hasn't played as well, but a lot of these guys are auditioning. There's still the elevation factor. If he doesn't have the same weapons, it's mildly concerning. Paxton Lynch is starting as well, which is just a total joke. I mean, the Broncos will probably try to run the football a lot, I imagine. Paxton is an athletic runner. The knock on him, which I've seen every time, is he can't read defenses and kind of locks in on his first option, and then if it's not there, he just kind of scrambles and whatnot. So could be a really ugly, sloppy game, but yeah, Mahomes would be the one guy I'd be interested in if I was targeting someone in this game with upside.
All right. And then the rest of the games are ones in which we have one team that is motivated and another that is not. I'll quickly run through those with their motivations. The Bears are in Minnesota. They have nothing to play for. The Vikings are motivated. They get the number 2 seed with a victory. We have the Raiders at the Chargers. Raiders, nothing to play for. The Chargers need to win and get some help, and they will get into the playoffs. 49ers at Rams. 49ers have nothing to play for. Rams are in an interesting spot where they could get up to the number 3 seed, but they cannot drop below the 4 seed. So really they're only playing for possible home game in the NFC Championship. We'll talk about them specifically in just one moment. Cardinals are at the Seahawks. Cardinals something to play for. Seahawks need some win and help to get in. Bills and Dolphins. Bills need some win and help to get in. Titans need to win and they get in. Jaguars are already locked into their spot. They could bump out their division rival, which could be interesting. The Bengals are at the Ravens. Ravens need some win and help to get in. Saints are playing for home field against the Bucs, who have nothing to play for. So all of these matchups where one team is motivated, the other is not. Levitan, we've gotten some news just in the last little bit, specifically on like the Rams. Let's start with that game because I think that's interesting just because it's like a difference of one possible seed. What are your thoughts on them and then maybe some of these other teams and any other games stand out as ones that are intriguing to you as far as motivation goes?
Yeah, the Rams situation you described, I'm actually not that surprised. I understand Freedman has a pretty good argument for why he is surprised, but Sean McVay basically came out and said that he thinks that it's more important to get healthy, to get mentally focused on the wild card game that they'll be hosting regardless than go all out. So he already came out and said he's going to rest his starters. Thus ends the Todd Gurley reign of terror. He was, I don't even know what DraftKings priced him at, probably like 10-5 or like something totally insane. So yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of backups for the Rams in this home game against the 49ers. I would actually have to go through their depth chart and think about it pretty hard. But I'm sure there's going to be some value options there if it's actually like a full rest situation. I mean, we haven't seen a lot of the Rams backups because their starters have been so like remarkably healthy. Like outside of Robert Woods, they really haven't had a lot of injuries. So, guys like Malcolm Brown come to mind, Lance Dunbar. I don't even know if he's still healthy. We'll see what they do. But, Josh Reynolds, I think a couple of us may have played once or twice, might get a more extended look. But if they're doing it with backup quarterback, who I don't even know who's their backup quarterback at this point. Is it like, can't be Sean Mannion still, is it?
I think it is.
Oh, God. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about this Ram situation, but for now, I'd say that there will be value, but it'll be low floor value, and I think it turns into a pretty good spot for the white hot 49ers offense.
Oh yeah, yeah. Interesting spot. Sean Mannion is the backup. Todd Gurley, price wise, he is 9.8, 300 more than Le'Veon Bell. Who Bell is motivated without Antonio Brown and playing against the Cleveland Browns, and he's cheaper than Todd Gurley. So, not sure if that says more about whoever, probably Todd Gurley and his dominance. Freeman, you were before the pod, you were talking about this Rams situation. Give us your take on it.
Yeah, so I mean, I think in general, if you have a chance to improve your seed in the playoffs, or at least keep the seed you have, you would want to play in Week 17, just because you never know what might happen in the event that you could randomly end up hosting the NFC Championship game. But this year especially, I think you would want to do that because you have the number 1 seed in the Eagles, who are without their starting quarterback. It is very possible that they could lose in the playoffs. And then at that point, home field advantage is, kind of a toss-up, because a number 2 seed, I mean, it's not as if they're invincible. Even if it's the Vikings, you could have a number 2 seed lose. The Vikings, they have a great defense, but offensively, Case Keenum, could you see Case Keenum losing a playoff game? Like, that is very possible. So at that point, you're the Rams and you would have home field advantage in the NFC Championship game. On top of that, in the second round of the playoffs, I think there's a pretty big difference between being the 3 seed and the 4 seed this year, because I would rather play the Seahawks or the Falcons as the 6th seed instead of the Saints or the Panthers as the 5th seed. So I don't know. And plus, I think there's maybe just some worth to, I don't know, being sharper going into the wild card round. But I mean, I don't know if that's really that important, but I don't know. I'm kind of surprised by this. One thing that I hadn't really thought of before, but maybe he doesn't want to have to face Garoppolo. Like, he just saw what happened to the Jags. Like, it might be like bad psychologically if it's like, hey, we're going to play and we're going to try to win, and then they just get gutted by a team that is dead and has been dead for most of the season. So potentially that could be something psychologically that's going on, but I don't know. I'm surprised by it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point.
Hey, can we talk about how the Niners, after this news, are still getting, their 4-point dogs? Jimmy Garoppolo, who's undefeated, the greatest quarterback of all time, who just torched the Jaguars defense, one of the best ever, with the likes of Goodwin, and all these guys.
That seems like a nice one to bet.
As soon as the news broke, like, a lot of times I see this stuff before the line moves, because like I'm just on Twitter, like my pathetic life, I'm on just Twitter so often, and I immediately, as soon as I saw it, went and I bet as much as I could on Rams on 49ers +4, thinking that the line hadn't moved yet. And now I'm sitting here and the line still hasn't moved. I'm like, oh my God, I may have just made a big mistake.
It seems good to me. I want to get some Bitcoin on.
Well, it's not moving, so it looks like you got a chance if you want.
Well, I would bet that it goes to like 3 and I'll be able to get off it. And obviously, like, since we're part of the Action Network now, I guess we can talk about sports betting more. But one reason I don't mind taking, hedge positions or like our positions on 4 is because if the line even goes to 3.5, you still get a good shot at a middle or a half middle. And if it goes to 3, obviously you have a really good chance. And if God willing it goes to 2.5, you'll have like the nut middle spot. So, So yeah, just a little sports betting there on our DFS pod.
Yeah, no, we're company men.
How is the GOAT Garoppolo, seriously though, like a dog when
if Sean Mannion starts? If they announce Sean Mannion as a starter, the line has to go to like a pick.
Yeah, I just don't get it.
Yeah, you get that.
Have we not seen enough out of Garoppolo? I was.
He just torched this Jaguar secondary. Yeah.
That was unbelievable. It really was.
He made so much money this past Sunday. So much money. So Pete, so we've been talking about these games where one team has something to play for, the other does not. But we do have different levels of motivation within those teams. So like the Vikings, for example, are at home. They're already locked into the playoffs. Really, the only thing they can do is they can improve their seeding, get up to the number 2 seed with a win. Versus there's other teams, like the Titans, they have to win or they don't get in. How do you sort of measure the different levels of motivation? Does that change, or are you just looking for pure motivation?
You're just looking for pure motivation. And again, like a lot of these guys that are going to be out there, like they're playing for their contracts. Like, it's not like people just go out there and they're not motivated, and guys, go out and play and just are like, oh, who cares? There's nothing that matters here. I'm just going to let these guys waltz into the end zone. Like, these guys are still going to try to, put good film out there. So motivation is really, really important when gauging opportunity, but it's not like one team's motivated, the other team's not. The other team's just going to absolutely trounce them. So it's one thing to be careful of. I think people get a little fancy with that. You can definitely find some nice contrarian angles as well with some of these teams that might not be as clear motivated versus other ones. So I love the Titans in this game. I assume that the Jags will rest some of these guys. I don't know what the heck they're doing with DeMarco Murray. I mean, Levitan's gotten a couple tweet storms about this, but it makes absolutely no sense. Torn MCL, and they can't give Derrick Henry the ball? What's going on there, Levitan?
Yeah, just inept coaching from the Titans all year, to be honest. Like, I mean, you could argue that the Browns have had the worst coaching performance all year. I would put the Titans' coaching performance right up there. So, yeah, just more of the same, just total inept coaching and an obsession with DeMarco Murray, despite every stat, traditional stats, advanced stats, showing that DeMarco Murray really can't play anymore.
We have one last game here to touch on. Neither team has anything to play for, but we are getting word that both teams are going to rest a lot of their guys. We have the Cowboys visiting the Eagles. The Eagles have nothing to play for. They've already locked up their seeding, their home field advantage, and then the Cowboys have nothing to play for either. They are out of the playoffs after last week, and we did get word that they are expected to limit their starters. Levitan, this is like a preseason game again, right?
Yeah, so I think this is going to end up hands off on both sides, because I think the Eagles will want to get some good run, like see something good out of Nick Foles and Alshon Jeffrey and these guys before they give way to the backups. And I think that Dallas will likely start their starters before giving way to a lot of backups as well. So I don't think we're going to get full games out of anybody here, and that would make it pretty hands off for me.
Any last thoughts, guys? Pete, Freeman, on any of these games? We sort of glossed over a lot of these ones where one team has something to play for, the other doesn't. The sort of big things with the news with the Rams and Cowboys and stuff like that. But any thoughts on any of these games, situations you might want to target, things that you're worried about?
Not really. One that's intriguing and I think hasn't gotten a lot of play. This could be Larry Fitzgerald's last game going against the Seahawks. Also potential last game for Bruce Arians. There have been some conflicting reports earlier today about whether he has agreed or hasn't agreed to part ways with the Cardinals. But the idea of this being Fitz's last game played in Seattle against a secondary that isn't its best right now, that's kind of intriguing. I mean, I don't know if that's anything that's super actionable, but Fitzgerald is still –
they gave him 15 targets last week, and they didn't have anything to play for that week.
Yeah, I mean, Fitzgerald is still at the top of his game. So intriguing for a guy to be able to get that kind of target volume in this type of week.
Mm-hmm.
I would trade lives with Larry Fitzgerald pretty quickly. That'd be near the top of the list.
Isn't he? He's a really good golfer too, right?
Yeah, I saw when Levitan filled in for me. I was down in Arizona. He is a member at Whisper Rock, wearing a tight shirt, and everyone loved him. And he's gotten really good at golf, living the dream, and just world-class guy. By all accounts, has had an unbelievable career. We'll see if he plays another year, but I do like that narrative. And one other thing we didn't really talk about that we were talking about in another chat, Levitan, you have tweeted some stuff out about this, is the contract incentives for some of these players. And that's kind of a tricky thing. I definitely want to hear Levitan's opinion, because most coaches want to get these players paid, and the players obviously know about these contract incentives, but there's been some weird stuff too with the owners who might have a disincentive to give these guys the bonuses. I tend to not think that's normally the case. I think that these coaches and players want to get it done. But Levitan, anything notable there, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, man, I'm hesitant to put too much stock in this. I think when you're in the heat of an NFL game, it's so hard to move the ball. It's not like the NBA where, like, if you want to get a guy shots, you can pretty easily get him shots. In the NFL, like, it's so hard. I would be shocked if teams were like, all right, we're going to throw the ball to Adam Thielen here so he can get his $250K or whatever. So I'm not going to put a lot of stock in it. I did tweet out last week a link that ESPN did to a lot of the good incentives if you want to look at them. One that stood out to me was Adam Thielen, and that's why I brought him up, but like he needed a bunch of catches and they totally airballed him last week. And it wasn't the owner, I don't think. It was just like, hey, Adam Thielen wasn't open. Diggs was more open that game, and it kind of is what it is. So I'm not going to go too much into that. I think Gronk has some incentives, but he's already hashtag how rich. So I don't know, man. I think there's just better ways to look at this slate.
Cool. Any last thoughts on motivation before we get into our chalk talk and stuff like that?
No, I mean, one small one. Hilton is, I think, like 42-ish yards or something like that away from 1,000 yards receiving. Like, I think the team will be motivated to get that for him. That's like the only good thing they have going for them this year.
Cool. Good stuff. Good segment, guys. All right, let's get into our regular segments that we normally do. Let's start with the chalk talk. When we're making lineups this week, again, this is Tuesday night, and we're still getting some news on some of these guys. So, again, definitely follow our news feed. Follow us at FantasyLabs NFL on Twitter to get up-to-date news on all this stuff. But let's talk about who we expect to be the chalk. Levitan, I'll kick to you first. You had mentioned Dion Lewis as a huge favorite here against the Jets, especially with some of the limitations of the backfield in New England. What are your thoughts on his ownership and some other guys that you expect to be chalky for Week 17?
Yeah, it's so early. Let me just say, I was just talking to Ian, who you all should know. Ian's been crushing on Twitter lately too. I was just talking to him, and he works on the projections with me, and we're gonna take it easy this week and kind of try to accumulate as much information as possible before finalizing the projections. So they'll be up, tonight, tomorrow, but I wouldn't really take them seriously until Thursday afternoon or so, and that's when we'll try to get them locked into more of what we know is going on. This is a 16-game slate that doesn't even start until Sunday, so no rush, guys. Everybody take it easy. With that said, early in the week, I mean, I've hardly looked, but first glance would be Dion Lewis, as I mentioned, if James White and Rex Burkhead are out as a huge home favorite against the Jets. And Brandon Oliver is 4K at home. Melvin Gordon's ankle injury appears to be severe, and Austin Eckler has a broken hand, which limited him to special teams only last week. We could be looking at a situation where Brandon Oliver is a feature back at 4K at home against the Raiders in a must-win game, and Brandon Oliver's calling card is kind of in the pass game. So on DK, where that's just so valuable, I believe Brandon Oliver, during the one season where he got extended time, was averaged one catch per 10 snaps. If he plays 50 snaps, that would be 5 catches, just massive on DraftKings. So, that was kind of my first look, and certainly Julio and McCaffrey, as I mentioned as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely that game, ones we want to target. Freeman, thoughts on any of those guys and others that might be standing out to you? Again, the caveat is a big one. Tuesday night, we'll update all the stuff with our on-the-site content. But early Tuesday night, guys that could be chalky.
Yeah, I'm there with Levitan on the guys he mentioned. Also interested in what the thoughts might be on the show for someone like Cam Newton or Russell Wilson. Both of those guys are in must-win spots or desired to win spots. Brady, I think, is – I don't know. I would be hesitant about going with him against the Jets later in the season, but it's a pretty decent matchup, and he's not super expensive. So I could see some people going with them because they are in a spot where they want to win. But Newton and Wilson specifically are intriguing to me.
Yeah, I like the Newton call. If Tennessee can figure anything out and we get, I don't think we're going to get a change from the coach, but given that the line is still favoring the Titans big time, I think Derrick Henry's really, really interesting. Even with the Jaguars defense, playing maybe half the game or whatnot, they're funneling better to the running back than the receivers. So I really like him quite a bit in this spot. All the Chargers, too, are in play for me this week as chalk. I mean, Melvin Gordon has been very consistent all year. Keenan Allen did bust last week, but I think he'll be heavily owned. Philip Rivers is another guy, but I probably prefer Cam.
And you guys don't want any of these Washington running backs, am I right?
I want to lose more money with Capri Bibbs.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll rest Samaje Perine, but outside of that, I doubt it.
Doubt it, man. Yeah, interesting prices for sure in New York. Okay, let's see here. Let's talk about some of the chalky fades and then leverage pivot plays. I guess we'll start off like Freeman. Are there any guys that we really are projecting to be chalky that you like would want to fade? Probably not. And then like, what's a way to be contrarian? I guess is the question.
I mean, honestly, I don't know, because this week feels so amorphous at this point that I think it's hard enough to identify who is even going to be chalky to know how to pivot off of them. I think it's at the point where so many guys could be contrarian plays, especially on a 16-game slate where ownership just automatically will be thinned out a little bit for each player. So I honestly don't even know where to start on this slate.
Levitan, what like edge wise, do you think that this is one of the bigger edge weeks, like for FantasyLabs user or for us, as guys who are really connected into the DFS industry?
Yeah, any week where information is more important than, say, analyzing matchups and stuff like that, I think is going to be a big edge for people that are working hard. I mean, you see that in NBA all the time. People that are working the hardest and are the most math-oriented, that follow the news the closest, are going to be rewarded. 1 week of NFL or 1 month of NFL or 2 months of NFL, you could be really good and not be rewarded for your work, unfortunately. So, yeah, I think this would be a week where you will be rewarded, hopefully. I think that we'll see ownership cluster a lot on guys that, like, people are going to be overwhelmed by a 16-game slate. You know what I mean? And they're going to be looking for help. So if a lot of people are talking about a certain guy, I could see ownership swelling to a point where it doesn't make sense. Like Josh Doxson comes to mind right away. Like, I've already seen people talking about it. Like, I can't wait to play Josh Doxson. I'm not sure Josh Doxson is ready yet to be a guy who's like 30% owned. Like similar to Devin Funchess. Like, there's certain guys, like, no matter how good the spot is, like, I'm not sure they are ready yet to be that guy who, like, can't fail as the chalk. That would be really bad to me. And we'll see on Julio. I don't think ownership's going to get out of control, but anytime Julio's up in like the 30-40% range, certainly scary.
Interesting. Do you think there's like some players that are going to be like just super high equity plays that, even the ones we've discussed here, that will be low owned just because the public can't digest information?
Yeah. I mean, that usually happens with late news, like Dion Lewis in the $100 double up on DK was only like 40%. But if that Dion Lewis news would have come out on like Wednesday and everybody had talked about him, he would have been like 80%, So I think if we get news late, you could get something like that. But if we get news early, I think people will be able to digest that. I mean, people are so much better now than they were before. I think people are pretty good at digesting it.
Yeah, that's fair. Pete, what are your thoughts on like people's understanding of motivation? Obviously we're talking about it now. We've put out content pieces, but like the people that you're going to be playing against, or the people in these GPPs, do you think they're going to understand motivation? Like, do you need to be super contrarian, or can you just play the guys that you think are the highest equity, and that's probably fun?
Well, for me, I'm just going to play the guys that are the highest equity. I've gotten cute this year with some tournament stuff, and I'm going to have to go into the lab and figure out strategies for next year. But my biggest regret this year is getting a little too cute. 2012 through last year, I just jammed in who I thought the highest equity plays were, and that worked pretty well. So for me, this week especially, I'm just going to jam them in. Obviously in tournaments, the best players are figuring out great ways to be contrarian while still having a lot of equity. But this week, I'm going to try to keep it simple and not try to overthink things and just jam in the highest equity. But in general, yeah, I mean, people are getting so much better. I mean, that's one thing you have to be cognizant of. If you look through games 2 years ago, a year ago, and then look at them now, like, players are just getting a lot better. So it's something you have to be cognizant of and definitely pick your spots.
Let's talk about stacking. We'll talk about conventional stacks, but I just want to talk about stacking as a general strategy as well. With all these different motivations in these games, it seems like, like you can have a wide receiver bust at any week, but it feels like more so this week, like there's going to be correlated busts, like a team's just going to suck or be unmotivated. So it seems like stacking is going to be very important, either positively or negatively. Levitan, what are your thoughts on that? Like game stacking Atlanta, Carolina, or something like that, and are there any conventional stacks that are standing out to you?
Yeah, I think one thing we see every week 17, I think Freedman alluded to it earlier, is that teams with motivation aren't necessarily the teams that play well. Like teams get tight or whatever, like every year it's like, oh, this team needs to win to get into playoffs. The other team has nothing to play for, and they fail. So I think that would be a decent spot to go. Contrarian, in terms of like safe plays, I think Phillip Rivers and Keenan Allen is going to be pretty safe. I think Tom Brady and Deion Lewis try to get all of the Patriots touchdowns, or Tom Brady and Gronkowski would be pretty safe. So I think there'll certainly be some safe options there. And the good thing about week 17 is, already mentioned Brandon Oliver, already mentioned like Patrick Mahomes or maybe some other Chiefs guys as options. There's going to be, maybe TJ Yeldon comes into play. Like there's going to be options to save on where you can be kind of safe with your stack, especially for like cash and leagues.
Yeah, I have a question kind of to take us back just a little bit to some contrarian ideas because Levitan there mentioned Gronkowski, and I'm curious as to the thoughts. Like if this is a slate where people might see more safety potential in Gronkowski than they normally see just in comparison to the rest of the tight ends. And so we see Gronk maybe with inflated ownership, and he's the most expensive guy on the slate minus Kelsey, but Kelsey might not even play. Would that make Gronkowski a guy that we probably should fade this week, or maybe not in cash, but maybe more for GPPs? And like, I mean, Levitan isn't the person to answer this, but like Antonio Gates, like if we're talking about the Chargers, Gates might be someone that we'd be interested in going against the Raiders, who are one of the worst teams in the league against tight ends. But I mean, it seems like if we're looking to be contrarian in a way that doesn't kill us, like it's never a horrible idea to do it at tight end because it's such a touchdown dependent position anyway. And then in a slate where people might have higher expectations for Gronk, higher exposure to Gronk, I don't know if that's the spot to do it.
Yeah.
Any thoughts there? I mean,
I think it's well said. It's interesting. I mean, thing is, Gronk is just so good. I saw a tweet today. I can't remember who I wanted to shout him out, but I'll have to go back. Maybe one of you guys saw it. But basically, how Gronk has overcome all these just ridiculous injuries. I mean, talk about a guy who's been hurt, been tackled at his knees, constantly taking a ton of punishment with his body, and this most recent stretch might be some of the best football he's ever played. So. That's the challenge, is that he's so good, but I'm curious what people will end up doing with him. I also think a big factor on his ownership is going to be how much value pops up that we feel really comfortable with. The slate is so dynamic right now because we don't know what every team's going to do, and we don't know who's going to end up being like a surefire value play. Like, for instance, if P. Ryan is ruled out and they say they're going to give Capri Bibbs as much work as he can handle, that's going to change the slate. So, Levitan, what are your thoughts on Gronk and what Freedman said?
Yeah, I mean, Gronk cost me so much money. I think it was 2 years ago, like 2015, that like I'm kind of forever scarred. And when I see a reasonable chance to fade him, I end up doing it a lot. But he's played unbelievable this year. I think when Chris Hogan is out, and we'll see if Chris Hogan plays this week, his touchdown expectation and kind of his overall target share continues to go up. So, yeah, man, I don't know. I mean, Gates is what, like 4,100 now? It's just sickening. I don't even want to talk about Gates. Can we move on?
What 4,200. One quick thing just to Pete's point about how unreal Gronkowski has been this year. He's probably the best blocking tight end in the league. But then on top of that, he leads tight ends in average depth of target. Like when you combine those two things, like that is an absolutely unreal combination to have, like in one player, and for him to do it at the best level. It's just, it is unreal. So yeah, I mean, it's terrifying. It's terrifying to invest in him. It's maybe more terrifying to fade him. So yeah, I can see it.
That's fair. Levitan, what one player has cost you the most money in your DFS career?
Oh God, so many. Everybody. I don't know.
Pete, it's obvious it's Amari this year, right?
No, I haven't played Amari that much. I kind of got off Amari early for I don't know.
But Pete's Amari, yeah.
Oh, Pete's Amari, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Levitan, for him, it's Tyreek. It's all the times he didn't invest in him.
Yeah.
Was it that first Odell year?
Yeah, the first Odell year was really bad. The Tyreek thing's not that bad because people usually don't play Tyreek in cash that much, so it hasn't really hurt me that much at all. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to think about that. Maybe Larry Fitz has certainly been somewhat painful this year, although I was off him like that Titans game. I was off him when he was like massively owned and he laid an egg, so that was good.
Yeah. Last thing here on stacks, we can talk about some contrarian stacks. And maybe I didn't phrase this quite as well earlier. I was just sort of talking about how correlations might be even more important this week, just because if we're wrong about a situation, it's not that we have to be wrong about a player in a combination. It's more that we could be wrong or right about a situation. Like if a team that we think is like, we don't know their motivation and then they're unmotivated, it sort of takes out their whole team. Whereas if they're maybe more motivated or play better than we expect, then a lot of these guys are in play. So Pete, like, are you going to take some chances on some of these teams where we just don't know about? Maybe a team that doesn't have a whole lot to play for, but just stack up some of those guys, like the quarterback and a couple of his pass catchers, and maybe they're playing for next year or something, and they go off. I don't know. Like, how are you being contrarian?
Yeah, that's definitely the way to do it. I mean, I talked about how I'm going to keep it simple this week. I mean, I'm going to really try to just grind it out and get jamming the highest equity guys I feel most confident in. So I'm not going to take as many contrarian stances, but that's definitely the way to do it. I think finding these games to stack potentially where there's not much motivation because everyone else is going to be focusing on trying to find those guys. So I think that makes a lot of sense. This week I'm just not going to play as many tournaments as I have in the past. So for me personally, I'm going to try to keep it simple, but I totally understand that angle, and I think that's a really good way to think about it.
Like Kirk Cousins and Capri Bibbs, maybe. Levitan and Freedman, any last thoughts on like the stacking or contrarian, how to be contrarian in GPPs this week?
You sound obsessed with Redskins stacks this week. If this Redskins stack goes off, I expect you to win all the money.
I don't know, man. It's intriguing for sure, right?
Vernon Davis. He's in a good spot. Going against the Giants.
Like, in hindsight, like, I considered Drew Stanton last week, didn't end up playing him, but Kirk Cousins was only 5,400, like 700 more. And, like, Kirk Cousins is, like, every week. It, like, doesn't matter. Kirk Cousins is just good, So, I'm never going to argue with you. Never going to argue with anyone about Kirk Cousins.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get to our bold calls. And then I'm not sure we have a whole lot of time here for some props, but maybe a couple if you guys have some strong takes. Let's get some bold calls for this week. These might be pretty interesting just because it's an interesting one. Freeman, why don't you throw some stuff out here?
Okay, I don't know how bold this is considering that Hilton has already lighted up the Texans this year, but I'm going to say he has 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I guess that's probably sufficiently bold. For a game, let me take a quick peek here. I think the Cardinals beat the Seahawks on the road. So they're right now underdogs by 8 points. I think they win.
Interesting. Pete, what are some bold calls you got?
Well, I already mentioned it. It's not bold, but I'm backing the truck up for the 49ers, hoping that I can be there with Levitan. I think that makes a lot of sense. Not bold, though. In terms of DFS, I mean, it's hard to say at this point in time, but I'm hoping we get some pre-bibs so you and I can make some money on these Redskins stacks.
Yes,
outside of that, I mean, it's tough.
It is tough, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like Seattle, maybe Paul Richardson has a big week. After disappointing last week, he had a really high prop. I thought that was interesting. Maybe Russ Wilson goes off. I'll call them as like a big-time stack. But, yeah, it's hard to be bold on Week 17 on a Tuesday night. So not to be disappointing the audience, but I don't want to give like a bad take. Levitan?
That's fine. Yeah, Levitan, what are some bold calls?
You got a bad take cooked up, bud?
I'll go with the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes going to Denver and just put a hurting on the starting unit of Denver and just humiliate this Denver team. So I'll say Patrick Mahomes, 3 touchdowns, 1 on the 1 legs, 2 through the air. And then I also think, I've been low on Atlanta all year. Just every chance I get, just try to be low on Atlanta and DFS betting-wise. Has worked out reasonably well. And I'll be low on them again. I'll say that Carolina goes into Atlanta and gets the outright.
I love both of those calls.
Yeah. So one interesting game here, Freeman. I just want to ask this before we get out of here. The Jags play the Titans. They're divisional rivals. So the Jags could just be like spiteful and just be like, no, you're not going to get into the playoffs. But also interesting, if the Titans win and they get into the playoffs, they probably will play the Jags.
Yeah.
So is there any strategy here from either from the Jaguars, what they could do? Do they want to play and see what, get more film on them, especially with Derrick Henry playing? I mean, what are we expecting from the Jags this week?
I don't know. It's such an interesting thing because we have seen situations sort of like this before, but I really don't know what we can expect. I think if you're the Jags, you take the week off and you let your younger guys play. And I think in a best case scenario, your younger guys are good enough to get the win. Your backups get the win, and that's something that can really sort of inspire the team or something. But I think you just try to get healthy and you don't waste your time playing in a game that really means nothing to you. And they're familiar with the Titans. They can beat the Titans easily, I think. So I don't know. I think from that perspective, they might even have some motivation just to let the Titans win, and then they can crush them next week.
That's fair. Yeah, that is such an interesting game to me, just with all the different motivations and the fact that they could play just again next week. Really interesting. All right, good calls. I think we're running out of time here, but I do want to open it up. I think this is probably the hardest week to do prop bets because we're not even 100% sure who's playing. But if any of you guys just feel real strongly about some guys and want to talk some crap to each other, feel free before we get out of here.
Amari Cooper did beat Crabtree last week. That was a nice win across the board. Didn't win any money on him, but I won some Coors Lights from you suckers. That was nice.
You did indeed.
I love how Crabtree gets 0 catches and no, if Amari Cooper would have done that, I would just be getting all hell. But Crabtree does it. It's it's whatever. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But yeah, the good news is, or I guess here's the situation with Amari Cooper. I probably lost $1 million on Amari Cooper this year, but I did get more likes than I've ever gotten on my Twitter feed from Amari Cooper tweets. So if I was draft cheat, I would probably call that break even. What do you think?
It's a wise use of $1 million.
I bought some likes. They're just a little expensive. But that's fine.
Let's see. I mean, do we just want to skip props this week? I mean,
I didn't think there's probably that much use for them, but
I mean, at this point, skipping props is the best thing in terms of profitability for me.
Let's do this. Let's do one prop each. We all get to pick a player that we expect to go over the FantasyLabs projection. That's it.
Our projections are not even I don't even want to say those. These are a mess right now. We're not prepared to publicly have our projections.
Okay. What do you guys want to do? You gotta do something.
I think there's some of them are close, right?
What if we have to pick a player who's in the winning lineup of the biggest DK tournament or something like that? I don't know.
That's so influenced by ownership, though.
Yeah, well, I know that's the point. You've got to factor that in.
Yeah,
Brian, I hate that idea.
That's fair.
I'll say Brandon Oliver would be the player most likely to be in the winning lineup if, assuming that Melvin Gordon's out.
Yeah, he's probably the highest equity play right now. I agree with that.
It's such a big game for the Chargers, though. I could see them injecting Melvin Gordon so badly that he ends up playing. So who knows?
Yeah. I don't know, Pete. What do you want to do?
I mean, I want Chris McCaffrey. That's what I want. Some revenge with Christian McCaffrey. That's about all I need.
Yeah. His prop is going to be 6 catches.
Yeah. I want to take Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
Let's see. Do we have What is he?
We have a line. Yeah.
What is he in the projections right now?
14.5.
Smash the over. Smash that over.
Yeah. I mean, the matchup is just so good. What did he do last time they played?
I got you.
Atlanta?
Yeah, I got you. Let's see here.
Maybe Levitan and I guess we'll do it on the 3 donkeys, but Levitan and I can make a prop bet.
He went for 20.4 DK points against Atlanta.
Yeah.
Last game.
Yeah, that makes sense. The thing is, like, I'm not sure McCaffrey ever gets to 30 just because, like, he's not going to touch the ball more than, 12 times or whatever, but he'd have to go, like, full Kamara, He'd have to, like, break 3 70-yard runs.
Yeah.
I think we should end it. We've given a lot of people a lot of goodness here.
Yeah, I think we're running out of steam. Okay.
Well, the good news is we have Cooper versus Crabtree again one more time. So
and the Amari Cooper Cup. Can't forget about that. Amari Cooper versus Cooper Cup. This is such a great prop.
And Cooper Cup has crushed that prop. I'm thinking just like.
The good news is Cooper has not played a lot of those weeks that Cooper Cup has done well. So
yeah, that is unfortunate.
At least I save a little bit of Coors Light in those.
Levitan, are you going to get into NBA soon?
Yeah. Hopefully. Having another kid January 23rd, and then take a couple weeks off for that, and then we'll have the All-Star break. So as soon as the games get really tough and, there's not a lot of equity to be had anymore, I'm sure I'll be jumping back in.
Perfect time. All right, we will end it there. Thank you guys for listening and watching. As always, good luck this week in Week 17. It's going to be a crazy one. Definitely follow our news feed and our Twitter, FantasyLabs NFL, and all of our content. We'll definitely keep you guys up to date on everything that's going on for Week 17 throughout the week. Good luck, and we'll talk to you guys next week.